My name is Jeff Anderson. I'm here with my colleague Mark Perlman, and we are privileged to be the advocates and lawyers for a large number of courageous survivors. I'd like to begin by first expressing on behalf of us to you, survivors and survivor families, and all the other survivors who have broken the silence and stood up and spoken out and been a part of this effort. Gratitude for your courage, because from it we have drawn strength and inspiration for your own healing and the protection of children, that these documents be disclosed and publicly disgorged and displayed so that the past can be known. What is in these documents and in the files that have now been revealed concerning 30 offenders against whom we had brought claims for the last decade on behalf of over 50 survivors is really a portrait of misplaced priorities, it's a portrait of misplaced loyalties. The priorities have been demonstrated to have been the protection of the offenders and the reputation of the Archdiocese. The loyalties have been to the offenders and to avoid scandal. And in each case, these files reflect something much more than mistakes. They reflect a systematic, ongoing, decade-long, continuous pattern of conscious choices by top officials of the Archdiocese, each of whom at various times heard of, became aware of, knew of reports that priests were offending children, and they made intentional and conscious choices to conceal that, protect the priest, protect the reputation of the Archdiocese, and in effect conceal the crime and give safe harbor to the offender. The documents tell a tale that has been long-standing, going back from the 50s and demonstrate through at least 2006 conscious choices. And we also see in the files reflected that it became known to top officials that their sexual impulses could not be controlled. They could not control themselves. And we see in the files that knowledge of that fact became known to each of the cardinals and their lieutenants time and time again. What is in these files and in the choices made, there's something much more than mistakes by these officials. But what the documents demonstrate to us is that all of the cardinals, including George, are complicit in a pattern of systematic secrecy. There's also the file of Father Norbert Mayday. And while his offenses of the children, and numbering in the dozens, go back in years, as do Joseph Bennett's, for which he's now serving and was serving 20 years in prison in Wisconsin. And you'll see multiple letters to Norb, meaning Norbert Mayday, while he's in prison, and the efforts the cardinal is giving to working with the governor in Wisconsin and the bishop there and others to get this guy out and loose again in the public. When their children were abused and when they were abused, it wasn't about sex, it was about power. And when they made the decision to share the secret and demand this disclosure, it is about their recovery of power and their healing.
In my view, the story today is not that there's priests who are abusing kids. That story has been told. The story today is, and what's new today is, that these documents reveal the decisions leadership made. There's been speculation about that, but now the documents will speak for themselves, and those documents will show that leadership did engage in a systemic cover-up of these matters. They routinely know. What's striking to me is every file is very similar. Each file tells the same story. The only difference is the perpetrator's name and the victim's names. The Archdiocese working hard to keep that all bottled up in secret, and then transferring these gentlemen from one parish to another so they can abuse again. When you read these documents, there's only one conclusion. They knew precisely what they were doing. As Jeff said, these were not mistakes. And these were decisions made at the very highest level. All of the cardinals on that list, all of the vicars for priests on that list, and other bishops who were involved in the decision making.
We want to and need to protect our future generations, our children, our grandchildren, our nieces, nephews, cousins, friends. They are all of us, children of God. And these officials took it upon themselves to put them above our Savior and perpetrate this for years and years and years.
These files, what they mean to me is the truth, not what's coming from the Archdiocese, even as early as last week when the vicar stood up and said there was no cover-up. Maybe we didn't know what to do, but there was no cover-up. When are they going to learn? There was a massive cover-up. The priest that abused me moved 7 times and abused others. If they would have stopped him like they would have stopped the other at the time of abuse, there would be significantly less victims. Part of the release of these files, I'm hopeful that there will be less victims in the future, and people will stop putting the reputation of the institution above the welfare of the children.
These files here represent a lot for us survivors. For some of us, it'll be answers. For some of us, it'll be peace of mind. For some of us, it's wanting to know. But for all of us, it's a start. It's a beginning. And the more that we find more survivors, the stronger we get, and we can get more files out of the Archdiocese.
I think what I want to say can be summed up in 8 simple words, and that is, these were not mistakes, and this is not history. Right now, some of these 30 priests are living and working among unsuspecting families, neighbors, colleagues. And so I think the next step is twofold. Obviously, more and more survivors have to show the courage that you all have shown and are showing. We beg you, if you're suffering in silence, shame, self-blame, we beg you to please find the courage to come forward. And we beg Cardinal George to discipline or demote and denounce and even defrock some of the members of his staff who are responsible for these individuals being hurt.
I think that occasions like this are very important for transparency and responsibility. And I do not think that the Catholic Church can fully heal, nor can we as survivors fully heal until this transparency and responsibility is made forward. But I also think that other orders, missionaries, and other orders of priests, in addition to the diocesan priests, be forced to give that information to the people so that we can stop this senseless and horrific abuse of our children for now and for the rest of time. I came forward in my own name. I committed no sin. I have no shame. the shame lies within those people.
The cardinal, if he truly wants to be completely transparent, he needs to release the other 35 diocesan priest files, and he needs to demand that every single church that is controlled by a religious order in the city of Chicago do exactly the same. Release all the documents on all of the pedophile priests that are religious orders, as well as the archdiocesan priests.
But it's rare when there's been criminal prosecution, either because of the statute of limitations or because the crimes were concealed for so long by these top officials that the criminal statute of limitations expired. And they knew what the criminal statute of limitations was, and they knew the way to keep the reputation intact was to conceal the crime, to protect the image. And that's what's so disturbing about this pattern. I can say that every time it is disgorged, it's ugly, it's sorrowful, it's painful, it's disgusting, and it discloses complicity in criminal conduct by top officials. That I can say.
The ability for the church, because of its power, because of its wealth, because of its running of institutions, it can gravitate and grab whatever professional opinion it needs. But in the heart of the law of the internal rules of the church is secrecy. You protect the cleric because they're higher than lay people. These children were not as important to them as the clerics were. That's why they made the conscious decisions in order to be able to move the cleric. Some of these guys were moving every 2 or 3 years in order to avoid the scandal, in order to keep the parishes open. Because ultimately, we all know this comes down to money, don't we? This comes down to the money and protecting the assets of the church. And that's what they chose over and above the children, the moms and dads, and the uncles, and everybody else.
Why, when they brought them back, did they not say, great news, Father so-and-so went for treatment, he had problems abusing kids, but he's cured now. We're going to put him in your parish. They concealed all of that. Nobody was told that. Tell me any other credible institution in the world that could have their leadership knowing of decades of sex abuse of children, and none of them is fired. And in the Chicago Archdiocese, no bishop or vicar for priests or cardinal has ever been disciplined for covering up sex abuse of children. And that's a shame. That makes you a non-credible institution.
Very briefly, be extraordinarily skeptical and vigilant. Don't for a minute believe that church officials have reformed, because they haven't in many respects.
Until the top officials are held accountable in the criminal courts for their complicity in crimes, be it failure to report, be it obstruction of justice, be it in child endangerment, they will continue to commit them. And until one of those bishops hears the jail door clang behind them, they will not evidently get the message.
Regardless of what anybody says, what happened to my son and all of these people was a crime, and they did nothing about it. And as Mark or Jeff said, any other corporation in the world, Penn State, the people in charge, they got fired or criminally prosecuted. They have done nothing in the Archdiocese of Chicago, and that probably hurts more than anything else, because being brought up a Catholic and the faith and trust you have, and then to be disappointed like this and have your child abused like this, there's no excuse for it. I don't care what they say.
I just want to conclude with the same remark and echo to all of the survivors and the families for all the years that you have spent with us, and from your heartache, from your sorrow, from your pain. We have all drawn courage. We have all drawn inspiration. We've all drawn strength, and now we've drawn some truth. And we're far from being settled here. And now what we do is move this forward until it is a full accountability, there is a full acknowledgement, and the truth is known so the kids are protected in the future and the healing can advance.